afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Die Rich, the podcast. I'm Howard Kaye, and each week we join you and bring to you things of relevance, things that are so important in estate planning and legacy planning, in fact, in every industry. And today is no exception. Today we have a special guest with us, Hillel L. Esquire, MBA. I love having all those initials. Where are my initials? Hello, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So Hillel is an expert in the field of asset protection, which is so important. In fact, it's something that I think people know the terminology, they've heard it, but there's something that's scary about it. I don't know if that's accurate or if you've heard that before, but people don't really understand the steps that are necessary in taking to truly protect your assets. We're going to get in today what asset protection really means, how to structure it, what the steps are getting involved in asset protection, and then how to combine that with the uses of life insurance, which is obviously, as you all know, what we specialize in, estate planning and legacy planning. At the end of the day, trying to create as much money for your family, for your charities, for your heirs, anything to do with being able to leave that legacy. So we're going to get into that. As I always like to say to our audience, listen with application. As my father said my entire life, listen with application. There's always something that you're going to get out of something that someone says. There's a golden nugget in there somewhere. And I promise you today is no exception. Hillel is going to share many of his golden nuggets with us. As I always like to say as well, it's about life. It's about the life that you live and the life that you leave. Remember, those that you love and care about most is really what we're here to discuss and how to protect them. So without any further discussion, let's get underway with Hillel. Like I said earlier, welcome. Hillel, tell us about yourself, what you do, and what is asset protection?
Sure. So asset protection essentially is the legal process of titling all your personal and business assets to put them beyond the reach of future potential threats and creditors while simultaneously enjoying those assets. So what that means in English is that people work so hard for their money, but they never worry about protecting it. And one lawsuit, whether it's caused by you or a family member or an employee, can take every single thing away that you worked your entire life for. So what we do as asset protection attorneys is we want to make it so difficult, so expensive, if not impossible, for anybody to collect any asset against you that either A, they don't want to sue you in the first place, or B, you can negotiate an inexpensive settlement. So asset protection deals with taking the chips off the table that you've worked so hard for so you don't have to start again.
Now, when we discuss this, obviously that's something that everybody would want to have to protect themselves. But on the basic level, you hear so often somebody saying, oh, you know what, we just set up a new LLC, for example, to cover this particular business because we don't want to mix that with our personal assets. Or I bought a home and I was going to put that in a trust, or I was going to put that into an LLC. Why aren't those things protecting your assets in the same fashion of what you're discussing?
Sure. So the thought is there, but like you said at the beginning, it's the application. So when you talk about an LLC, you can't just set up an LLC and expect it to be protected. There was a June 2010 Florida Supreme Court case called Olmstead. It was followed by another case called Barber that changed LLC law forever. So if your LLC is not set up correctly with the correct operating agreement and all the asset protection clauses, well, you might as well not have spent the money setting up the LLC in the first place. And the trust is probably one of the biggest misconceptions we see. I can't tell you how many times every single day someone will call our office or come into our office and say, hey, I have a trust and I'm protected. And the answer is more than likely you're not. The majority of trusts that we see are what are called revocable living trusts. If someone has a trust, the majority of the time, that's the type of trust that they have. And a revocable living trust will be a great tool when you pass away from an estate planning point of view, but it gives you literally 0% asset protection while you're alive. So people think they have an LLC and they think they're protected, but they're not, or they have a trust and they think they're protected, but again, they're not.
Well, I can see how easy it is for someone to get confused by it, because when you talk about a revocable trust, living trust, for example, the main benefits of that are that there's direct designation, beneficial designation, so that we don't have to worry about probate. But yet people often mistake that with thinking they're fully protected. And as you're saying, they're really not. It may have solved one problem that they were trying to address, but it doesn't solve what you're suggesting, which is to protect yourself from all creditors so that nothing can be attached to you in that respect. Now, going back probably, 30, 35 years ago, when I first heard about asset protection, I think the scary thing for us in business, and that field was probably pretty new at that point, was the discussion of offshore assets. And everyone was concerned that, well, were you doing asset protection with offshore partnerships as a way to avoid income taxes, or were you really doing it as a methodology of protecting your assets? So how do you address that? And are you still using offshore accounts today? And what is the combination between how much is asset protection and how much are people really trying to, in the midst of all of it, avoid income taxes?
Sure. So, we have a nationwide practice. We help clients in almost every single state in different countries as well. And we do both domestic and international asset protection. In fact, we've helped rewrite some of the international asset protection laws. There is nothing wrong with having an international asset protection entity like a trust or an LLC. There is nothing wrong with having an international bank account. There's something very wrong with having them and not reporting them to the government, the IRS, the Treasury Department, etc. So like anything, you have to do things the right way. Anytime we set up an international entity, whether it be a foreign trust, an LLC, etc., we get a U.S. tax ID number. And we actually alert the IRS, we alert the government of the international entity that we have. And once a year, you file a paper telling the government what you have, because we're not doing this to save taxes. We're doing this to protect ourselves from frivolous lawsuits. And it's like anything, right? I mean, you can have a gun and you can use it for protection. You can have a gun and you can go to the shooting range. You can't take the gun and go rob a 7-Eleven. So it's unfortunate because there's been a few bad characters in the space who might have used international entities to do bad, illegal, unethical things like not pay their taxes. And as a result, unfortunately, it's given some of the industry a bad name. But you always want to make sure that you do it legal and ethical, and there's absolutely no problem with it at all.
And who do you see this really being a fit for? Is there a certain net worth that you suggest this is when you should start looking at it? Or is there a way for everyone to be involved with asset protection?
Sure. So my short answer is that everybody needs asset protection. Probably 80% of our business and our clients are business owners aged, 30 to 70 with a net worth anywhere from, 1 million to 100 million. With that being said, we have school teachers that have saved up a few $100,000 over their career. Now, we have 40 or 50 NFL or NBA players who protect themselves. We work with billionaires. The answer is it's for anyone, but I would argue that the less you have, the more important it becomes, because take the person who saved up maybe a couple $100,000 over their career. Well, if they get sued for $1 million, they're wiped out. The real rich guy who has $20 million in the bank, if he gets sued for $1 million, he's not going to be happy, but he still has 19 left.
Right. The idea about protecting assets on a smaller level. Well, let's talk about costs. What does it take to set these things up? And I assume there's a structure that the more you're worth, the more it's going to cost because there's the more work that has to be done.
Potentially. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of things you could do for free. And at the end of the day, if you can do something for free, do it for free. So for example, and again, it depends what state you're in Florida, life insurance is protected. So you can buy as much life insurance as you want, and it's all protected. Your home is protected. Annuities are protected. Retirement accounts are protected. Florida, I make a joke, it's a great state to live if you want to be a debtor. but there's so
Right.
many things you could do at literally no cost at all. With that being said, I don't tell people what to invest their assets in. People come in and maybe they have money in a brokerage account, or maybe they have 5 pieces of real estate. Then we protect it. And you could do things, for a very, very minimal cost. You could spend a lot of money. It's never all or nothing. Any steps you can take to protect yourself always make sense.
No, absolutely. Here's a question for you. And, we address this a lot in the life insurance industry. Tell our listeners why people don't involve themselves in asset protection. What are the naysayers saying about it?
Sure. It's 3 reasons. Number one is they don't know about it until it's too late. There's 1,000 estate planning attorneys in every city. There's 1,000 personal injury attorneys in every city. There's 1,000 real estate attorneys in every city. We may compete with 5 law firms in the country. So a lot of people don't even know what asset protection is until it's too late, until they have a lawsuit, until they have a judgment. Number 2 are just misconceptions, and that's for 2 and 3. Number 2, we talked about they have a trust, which is a great estate planning tool, so they actually think they're already protected, but they're not. And then number 3 is liability insurance. A lot of people say, well, isn't that why I have insurance? And insurance is a great first step, and I'm talking about liability insurance. But if you look at the stats, the majority of lawsuits, probably about 70%, are not covered by insurance. And, my dad used to say growing up, he'd say, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. I had someone get sick in one of my homes. I had a $10 million policy until the insurance company pointed out that in 4-point font, mold is only covered up to $5,000. So there's a reason why the $5 million umbrella policy only costs you $1,000, and it's because the liability insurance carriers don't love paying it out.
Now, here may be a naive question, but I'd like to throw out questions that I think people are thinking of themselves. And that is, typically, when you think in terms of an estate planning attorney, the assumption that so many have is, well, they're protecting my assets as well. That's why they're setting up these trusts. Is there a correlation between the estate planning attorney and the asset protection attorney whereby they're wearing both hats, or are they really both separate industries? And there's a reason to keep it separate.
Yeah, so the answer is they should be wearing both hats, but they don't. So, for example, I'm sure you've probably heard someone puts in their will or trust, when my son's 30, he gets a third. When he's 40, he gets a third. When he's 50, he gets a third. Well, what if when your son is 30 and he's supposed to get a third, he's going through a divorce? He just lost a third. What if when he's 40 and he's supposed to get a third, he's getting sued for a car accident? He just lost his third. So the problem is the estate planning attorneys are looking at with these lenses, these goggles, and they're only looking at estate planning. I always tell my clients they need to make sure their team is talking. And, it sounds very difficult, and it's a lot easier to be poor and unsuccessful. But if you're doing anything at this level, you need to be thinking asset protection planning, estate planning, tax planning, financial planning, business succession planning. There's no point in protecting your assets if half of it goes to estate tax. There's no point in protecting, in having a great estate plan if you lose everything to a car accident, and so on and so on. So you need to make sure that the team is talking.
Now, are you involving your practice within all of these other professions as far as estate planning and so on, or are you strictly doing the asset planning side?
So we have an estate planning attorney. She has her LLM and master's in estate planning, teaches estate planning. She's practiced for 25 years. We have a business succession planning specialist. We have a tax planning specialist, but we don't have them because we're trying to do that work. People only come to us for asset protection planning. I really have those other advisors or specialists to help work with the client's team. Now, look, if someone comes to me and they have no estate planning attorney, sure, I'll help them with a simple will or trust, but that's not our goal. People come to us for asset protection. We never want to step on the toes of other advisors. We have them because when we put an asset protection plan together, we want to make sure that it's also beneficial from an estate planning point of view, a tax planning point of view, a business succession planning point of view, and of course, a financial planning point of view.
Well, it's a fascinating space. There's no question about it. And I guess if there was one plea that you would make to people, what would it be?
Just educate yourself. I always tell clients, own nothing, control everything. Own nothing, control everything. Because if you own it, you can lose it. And people work so hard, so I tell them, for every 60 minutes you spend making money, stop and spend 60 seconds thinking about how to protect it. You never want to look back and say, hey, I've worked for 40 years. I thought I was getting ready to retire. My daughter got in a car accident. The car was titled to my name, and now I have absolutely nothing. So you never want to say shoulda, coulda, woulda. So just educate yourself and see what the options are.
Well, it's a great way of thinking about it. And I would assume that many people also have preconceived notions, such as, well, if I get involved with all the asset protection, I won't have control over my money. So when you say you don't own it, but you want it all, they do have control, correct?
Absolutely. In domestic asset protection planning, the majority of the time, with very, very few exceptions, the client does not lose control. So they can control everything and still be protected. When you do start talking about international asset protection, you do need to give up a little bit of control. Most people come into our office and they're 0% protected. If they put together a good, solid domestic asset protection plan, they could probably get 80, 85, 90% protected. In order to get close to 100, they do need to go international. But with international, you are probably going to give up some control, which some people are not okay with, and that's okay. You need to do what's right for you.
Right, absolutely. Well, you and I met many years ago, and I must tell you, I was very impressed from the moment I met you. Just tell us a little bit about your background. You're a young man. I think you're about to turn 40, but the level of knowledge that you have in this space is so far superior to most out there. You've got a tremendously successful practice. You speak all over the country, giving seminars, being brought in for corporate events, going to meet with wealthy families, and actually any family that needs your assistance. You're there for them. What was the impetus for you to get into this space? What did you love about it so much?
Sure. Well, I grew up, the first half of my life in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York. And since a kid, when I was 5 years old, I was always involved in business, whether it was taking my allowance and buying a few dollars worth of candy and coming home with triple the amount. My parents wanted to know what I was doing. And at that point, I was also very close with my uncle, my uncle was one of the first personal injury attorneys to ever advertise on TV. So my whole life, I grew up business, 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 law, 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 and I always knew I was going to be a lawyer. I had never even heard of asset protection until I met my mentor, who ended up doing asset protection for my family. And when I saw it, I said, this is unbelievable. I said, this is the perfect mixture of business and law. I said, on top of that, I now get to be the lawyer that hates all the other lawyers. Because every lawyer is out there trying to find a way to take your money. I thought it would be so neat to be one of the few in the whole country that teach you how to protect it. So when I met my mentor, I did anything and everything I could to read, study, because there's no law school class on asset protection. You need to teach yourself. And then, of course, I had a great mentor who taught me, and I've been an attorney now for, 15, 16 plus years. And since then, like you said, yeah, we probably do 50 to 100 paid speaking engagements across the country each year. I've written several books on asset protection. I've helped rewrite the international asset protection laws. So it was just the perfect fit of business and law, and I love education. I used to teach graduate and undergraduate business law. So between business law and teaching, for me, it was just a perfect fit.
Well, that's tremendous. Well, congratulations on the success at such a young age, and you've really built such a wonderful practice that really helps so many. You and I are very similar in the ways that we speak, we sell, we market, we educate. And I just want to go through a little quick a word association that I do with everyone, just to hear different people's ideas on how they became successful and what these things mean to them. So, without further ado, let's get into that. What I call the K formula success right now is now the Presser formula for success. The first two words, work ethic. What's it mean to you?
Over and over. You have to work so hard over and over, for anything and for everything. You just have to outwork the other guy. I mean, work harder. And when you think you've worked harder, do it again.
Education.
Never stop learning, never enough. I did undergrad, I did law, I did MBA. I'm still learning. My mother, who unfortunately passed away, went to law school in her 50s with my great aunt who went to law school in her 80s. She was
Oh,
the
wow.
oldest person ever to graduate from law school. You never stop learning, and the minute you think you stop learning, you're done.
What a testimonial for children, that they need to hear that. Becoming the expert.
Find a niche and become the expert. Better than being great at 100 different things, find one thing that you do very, very well and become the expert. And not only become the expert, but show people you're the expert. You could be the best thing, but if no one knows you exist, who are you? Write
Right.
books, write articles, do radio interviews, do presentations. You may be the expert, but show people you're the expert.
Creativity.
Doesn't stop. You have to be thinking 10 years ahead of everyone. I'm trying to think right now, what are the creditors going to do 10 years from now to try and unwind one of my asset protection plans? And I'm trying to fix that now before it happens 10 years from now. It's like Uber or any new business. You got to be ahead of the curve.
Well, it just reminds me when you just said that, almost like the hackers in the computer world, because these big companies are doing every defense mechanism to keep their sites from being hacked and the data from going into the dark web. And they have to think years ahead of what will the next steps that these hackers are going to do. In your case, what are the next steps that people will come up with to try to get your money, and you're going to have the protection for them. Excellent.
Hopefully those big companies are hiring the hackers.
Next, communication.
So important. Service communication is the most important thing in life. It's the most important thing in business. It ruins relationships. It makes relationships. If ever in doubt, communicate. I always say, nobody can ever get mad at you for communicating and being honest. They might not like what you have to say, but they can never be mad at you. So communicate as much as possible and then communicate some more.
Absolutely. Marketing.
Marketing, very, very important. Again, you can have the best product or service in the world, but again, if no one knows it exists, it means nothing. You could have a car that, you press one button and it flies, and maybe it exists out there, but if you don't tell the world about it, you might as well not have it.
And finally, relationships matter.
Most important thing in life is relationships and reputations. We can all talk stories and stories about, how one thing came together with another thing. I mean, even me, just and you sitting here, I remember seeing you and your father. I was so impressed with you. I might have been in high school or college or law school at the time. I used to see your billboards, and now we're sitting here together now, and the relationship that we've had between then and now, all the different types of relationships, nobody in the world would have even guessed that. So
Right.
There's nothing more important in life.
Absolutely. Well, Hillel, this has been great. I hope everyone's pulled some of those golden nuggets out. If I must tell everyone one major point that I got out of this was that you want to deal with the best in industry, in the asset protection field. Hillel Presser, his knowledge, his expertise is beyond, but more importantly, it's a person that truly wants to help. Sure, all of our own industries is where our livelihood comes from. But at the end of the day, you also want to be dealing with somebody that says, these are the steps that I can take to help you and make a difference in your life. And let's face it, the most important thing is a value add. And you certainly bring a value add. So congratulations on that. Hillel, tell everybody about just a couple of your books and how they can reach you. And I think you're even willing to give some of the books away for people to start learning about this subject.
Absolutely. The most important thing, even if you do nothing, like I said, is just educate yourself and know what's out there. Our website is www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. That's www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. And if they go to our website, as long as they mention your show, I'm happy to ship them out complimentary copies of our latest books. I'll send them the last two that I wrote, let them educate themselves, and any friend of yours is a friend of mine.
Well, that's great. Hillel, thanks so much again. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Howard Kaye, Die Rich, the podcast, with our special guest, Hillel L. Esquire, MBA. I love saying that. Very impressive. We didn't get a chance to really talk about life insurance, but let's face it, everyone knows that's the business we're in: estate planning, legacy planning, creating wealth for your heirs, your favorite charities, and the combination between what Hillel will be able to do for your family as far as protection, combined with what we can do on the legacy end, is just phenomenal. So again, 800 Die Rich. You've got Hillel's phone number. Hillel, throw it out one more time.
The phone number is 561-953-1050, or the website is www.assetprotectionattorneys.com.
Terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for listening today. Die Rich, the podcast, and we will be with you again next week. Take care.